Hey everybody, welcome back to DJ Tutorials. This is going to be part two of the scene animation project. And if you haven't checked out the first tutorial, definitely do that because I explain how to get all of the 2D elements that you're going to need, how to get the materials and the 3D assets, like what you're seeing right here in this sort of preview of what we're going to be doing today. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be appending our 3D assets, and we're going to be scaling them up and moving them around inside of the scene so that we can get things kind of set up where they need to be. This is just sort of placing them generally where they need to be and getting an idea about what our composition is going to be like. And then we're going to be using GIMP to create a seamless texture like what you're seeing right here, where we have the textile image that we got last time, and we're going to create this seamless texture. And we're also going to make the flame texture like what you see right here. Obviously, this isn't going to be what the final looks like, but we are going to take that flame image and turn it into an image texture that we're going to be able to use like this to create a fire, as well as creating this right here, which is an image that we're going to sort of adjust to create the map asset that we're going to use later. So let's go ahead and get started. So here we are inside of a general default scene here, and to just begin, we're just going to delete everything because we want to start from a fresh canvas, so to speak. And what we're going to do is we're going to start appending all of the 3D assets that we downloaded and put in here. But we're going to do it one at a time. And I would recommend that you kind of like watch me do this and then you do it on your own and then see how you do. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to append stuff. Now you can link things. So if you've created a full scene of something, or somebody who you're working with has created a environment or something like that, you can link that and then you can kind of like have it to where it updates and you can't really move things around. So linking is good for that, but we want to append these elements because we're going to be adjusting some of these. So let's append. And what you want to do is you want to navigate to your 3D assets area, and we're just going to start off with the fancy picture frame. And inside of the Blender file right here, we can double click on that, and if you go inside, you can see that there is an object folder. And if we go in there, you can see that there's these two elements here, the frame and the picture canvas. So let's select both of these and select append. And if I hit the period on my num keys here, you can see that we have, if we go to the material preview, we have the materials and everything have been imported just fine. And we're going to be doing this in Eevee. You can use cycles, and I will probably show how to do a render in cycles as well, just for those of you who want to have a higher quality image. But you can see that with the built-in Eevee render engine, it looks completely fine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make this one object by holding shift, selecting the picture frame here, and you can see that there are some modifiers here. And if we hit Control J to make them the same object, you can see that nothing really happened there. So we can just keep that as one object and it will be fine just to keep it like that. And we can keep that right there. It says fancy picture frame. So let's go ahead and hide that for now, and let's append another item. So let's bring in the brass vase 3 object, brass vase 3, and there it is right there. And we will hide that for now. And let's go in here and we are going to append another item. So let's bring in the round wooden table, and I'm going to go into the objects here, and you can see that there's the bolts and the table. Now the bolts are really, I think, underneath, and we're really not going to see that, so we only need the table here. You could bring the bolts in and join them together like I just showed you how to do, but really this is just fine. So when we import this, you can see, if we look at it pretty closely here, you can see that there is a sort of like low resolution edge here, and we can kind of see that. You can see that there's the geometry is kind of visible, okay? And what we kind of want to do here is we want to create a more smooth surface. Now, if we press Control 2, it will add, you can see right underneath this right here, this is a weighting modifier for some normals and stuff like that. But if you can see here, we've created a subdivision surface modifier. And if we turn this on and off, you can see that it's having some weird effect on the actual materials. So even if we click and drag this up here like this, you can see that it's still visible. So what we need to do here is if we go into edit mode, you can see that there's this edge here, but it goes off into the center. And these are what are called tries or triangles. So there's three sides to these pieces here. And that's going to kind of create a problem when we are using a subsurface modifier, it creates some sort of like weird effects like this. So we kind of need some edge loops to just sort of reinforce that texture material. And if we press 3, that goes to the face select, and we can left click and drag to select all of these, hit I to insert, and we can just drag that down just a little bit like that. And if we go back to object mode, you can see that that has been fixed right there. So basically we just added another loop here. So that's basically all you really need to do there. And you can have a really nice smooth side there. And everything else seems to be holding its shape really, really well as far as the textures are concerned. And we can now move on. So let's go ahead and hide that as well. Let's import or append another item here, and we're going to bring in the wooden crate, go to the object, and you can see there's 3 items here. Append that. And all we're going to do is hit Alt A to deselect everything, because sometimes other stuff is selected up here in your node tree. Hit A to select everything, Shift, and select this one so you can see that yellow outline, then Control J, which will make it all one object. And now we can just move that around by itself. And let's go ahead and hide that. Let's append another object here. And we can bring in the lantern, double click on the lantern and go to the object. And we're going to grab both of these. Now there's a little bit of an issue here that I'm going to talk about. And with Eevee, when you start to have some rendering, sometimes the glass doesn't render exactly right, and you might have some issues or something like that. And what we need to do here is go to the materials right here, go down the list on the right here. Let's see if I can pull this over. And what you want to do is just make sure that it says here blend mode is alpha blend, and the shadow mode, keep that opaque. We can do alpha clip and hashed if we want to, but really this should be fine. And make sure that screen space refraction is on there. And you can see that it looks pretty good. Now the only thing is that it's really not quite accurate because real glass has thickness. So let's add a little bit of a thickness here with Solidify. You can see it makes it a little bit too large, but we can use the offset here, make this a 0. And we can bring that, actually take the offset, move it to the negative value, and do something like that right there. So just a little bit of thickness should be fine, just for a little bit of added realism, especially in cycles. You can really kind of see that. And you can feel free to add that or not if you want. But what's going to be a problem is I want to actually make these two things one object. And when you do that, you can sometimes run into issues when you have these modifiers. So for example, if I select the other object like this, press Control J, it now has lost that modifier because it takes on the properties of the other object. So if I hit tab, you can see here that the glass area was selected, and we can go into the materials and we can actually select this right here where it says lantern 01 glass, click on select. And what we're going to do is go down here to this right here, see where it says object data properties, and where it says vertex groups, click plus, and we can name this glass and click assign. Then we can go over to the modifiers and we can add back that Solidify. And you can see it just applied it to everything, but we can select the vertex group glass so it's just on the glass like that, and then change the offset back to what we want it to be, like a +1 or a -1, and you can then adjust your glass thickness like that. And there we go. So that's how you can add a Solidify to kind of like a selected area, a vertex group within an object, and still keep it as one object so it's easy to move together. Now you can add a object constraint and parent it, so you can make it a child of an empty or something like that, which for some people that's easier or whatever, but this way, we really don't have to have a whole bunch of other handles and stuff like that. We can just select the object, they're grouped together, and they're also kind of like separate objects as well, and we can move that around. So really no big deal there. Let's go ahead and save our file. So file save as, and we can go into our PRJ folder and save this as, you can call this animation scene or whatever it is. I'm going to call this just scene 1 right now. You might want to save some different versions as you go as well. So maybe scene V1 or something like that, and increase the versions as you go. So let's turn this off, let's hide it, and let's append some other stuff. So let's go and grab the green chair. There it is. Go to the object, green chair. There it is. Easy peasy. Turn that off. File, Append, and we're going to grab the magnifying glass this time, go into the object folder, grab the magnifying glass, and there it is right there. Now we will run into a little bit of an issue when it comes to the glass here, but we can always adjust that as needed. You can see that there's this sort of iron look to it, the metallic part. So what we can actually do here is we can select this, and if you want, you can go and split your panels like that, go down into the shader editor, and you can see here, if you go up to edit preferences, you can add what's called Node Wrangler. So just search for that, Node Wrangler right there. And you can control shift left click on these different nodes inside the node graph here. And you can see what these things are. So if we look at just this image texture, you can see it's a black and white image and it's going right into that base color. And what we can do with that is we can actually throw in a converter color ramp right in there, and we can view through that with control shift left click, and we can change this color here to a brassy sort of color if we want. So something kind of like this maybe, and then look through there and you can see that there is a more sort of like brassy look. And the other thing is that it's not set to a metal. So if we go down here, you can see where it says metallic, left click and drag that up, and now we have a metal instead of that sort of like plasticky look. So it looks a little bit more like what we want. The other thing that we might want to do here is adjust the roughness. So if we take this color ramp, or actually let's just make a new one since it'll be black and white if we shift that right in there. Look through here and you can see it's pretty light colored, which means it's pretty rough, but you might want to have a little bit more of a shinier look to it. So we can bring this white color down a little bit and look through there. And that's kind of what it looks like, but maybe you want to keep that up higher and then just pull this over a little bit like that, so that the scratches are still kind of like there and a little bit rough. And we can even pull this over like this and pull this over this way. And you can adjust the roughness as you see fit from that image texture there. So pretty cool that you could do that, and you can make those adjustments on the fly by appending these items inside your scene. So let's close this down a little bit like that. And we're just going to hide this one for now as well. So let's just hide that. The last thing here, let's go ahead and grab the vintage pocket watch and go into the object. And you can see that there's a whole bunch of stuff right here. Select all these and append. And let's just take a look at this object here. And when we look at it close up, it looks really, really cool. This is a really neat item that you can throw into your scene wherever. And what we really want to do with this is select all this stuff here and make it one object. So let's go ahead and just select this outer area here, and we're just going to hit Control J, and that's going to put it all together. There's a little bit of a shift here when it came to some of the normals on this minute hand, but we're really far away, and I'll just Control Z just to show you. So you can see there was some weighting that was done, and the subdivision here. You can see here there's a subdivision surface modifier put on the outside of this right here. So there might be a couple changes with the way that the parts on the inside are done, but you know what? From far away, we're really not going to see a whole bunch of a difference, and this might look better anyway. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to redo that and put it back together as one object. So there it is right there, and we can go ahead and hide that. Okay, so let's go ahead and unhide everything with Alt H, and you can see here that we have a lot of stuff here. It's currently set to rendered, so you might want it just to be in this mode here with solid. And you can see everything's at different scales. So what we need to do is, and I'm just going to do everything based on the table. I'm not going to go in and make sure everything is at a perfect scale. It really doesn't matter. And you can see that the origin point for this is set to the bottom, which is really nice because it makes it easy for us to scale this up. So I'm going to just make this a little bit larger like that, grab it on the Y. I'm going to hit Control A to apply the scale just in case any issues come up with that. And I'm going to move this over here like so. And I'm just going to take a look at a top view here, and I'm just going to move this so that I have the other actual file that I made just kind of like in my other window. So I'm going to try to make this a little bit similar to the one I already made so that it makes sense to the animation that I showed you guys already on how this is going to look. So there we have it like that. Now, the next thing that we're going to want to do is have a crate here. And basically what I did is I just, I kind of just position these things just sort of willy-nilly at first, just to get the scene sort of started. And then once I figure out where my camera is going to be, I make adjustments. So you can see when I adjusted the size here, that it already has an origin point set to that bottom area there. So it makes it a lot easier to scale things up. Then let's take the vase here, and you can see that's pretty small. And in the final, I just kind of use these as decoration in the background. So I'm just going to scale that up a bit, go to the top view, and I'm just going to put these somewhere in the background, and I'm going to duplicate that, hit X to lock it on the X axis, and just put it over there somewhere. So just kind of like throwing things around a little bit at first. This is going to be on a back wall that we don't have. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to put this somewhere back here and scale this up a bit and move it around just to place it, roughly where I think it's going to be in the final composition. And then we have the lantern here. So let's grab that on the Z and we'll place it on the tabletop, scale that up a bit, maybe like this here, and we'll move it over kind of like here, rotate it a little bit so it's pointed a little bit towards the camera and kind of like place it there. And the watch, you can see the watch right here. We kind of need this to be laying more like this. So hit R, hold Control to kind of like lock it on the. I'm looking at this from a side view, by the way. So 3 on the numpad. R, hold Control, and you can see that it's sort of like locking it to a specific degree here. And if we open up the properties with N, you can see that the rotation is -90. So you can hit R -90 and it'll do that on the X axis. If you hit RX -90, but I just did it that way just because. So grab it, bring it up, locking it on the Z like this, and then we can scale it up a little bit. I'm sort of guessing how the size of everything is, and we're going to change it according to what looks good with the final anyway, but I'm just going to place it like this, put it over here, rotate it a little bit like that, and then let's grab the magnifying glass right here, 3RX -90, which we'll do like I said earlier, and grab it on the Z, move it up here, and we can put this sort of like this here. And when we look at that with the rendered view, actually, let's just use the material preview here because that has a proper HDRI and stuff like that. You can see that everything looks kind of okay. We got some stuff placed around, and we can start to build out the environment. Now, in order for us to build out the environment, what we need to do is we need to actually create some textures, some materials based on the 2D assets that we collected from the last video. So the rest of this video is going to be basically how to create the seamless texture for the wallpaper in the background and to create the map texture that we're going to use when we make that object as well, and how to make the flame that we're going to put on the inside of this lantern here. So let's go ahead and get started with that. The first thing that we are going to do is we're going to make a seamless texture of the wallpaper here. And I wanted to show you first what it looks like before we make it seamless. So if we go inside of Blender, and I don't want you to do this yourselves, I just want you to kind of look at what I'm doing. If I go in here and I add the wallpaper before we do any seamless stuff, and I'm just going to set this to the regular UV, and I'm going to set the mapping value here to a 1. And this is basically what it looks like on a grid. So you can see that let me change this to flat here. And you can see that it's normal. We don't see any problems with it. And if this is all you were going to use was a square like this, then you'd be fine. But the problem is that if we start to sort of change this stuff to what we're going to end up actually using. So right here where it says value, if I take this and I move it so we can kind of like look at the gridding a little bit closer here, and I zoom in, you can see there's a very obvious slice here. We can see where the pattern is repeated. And that's not going to look very good. And there are ways sometimes that you can take this, change it to this box, and then add a blend. But for this, it actually doesn't work very well. And in general, it's not going to work very well for our scene to do it like that. It's going to have some weird smearing effects if this was working, and sometimes it's not really great. And there is a very easy way that we can make this seamless. So let's do that right now. When you open up GIMP, which is what we're going to be using for this, there's a very easy way that we can set a seamless texture from something that we have. And it doesn't always work. You sometimes have to experiment to see if it's going to work, but this one actually works just fine. So what we can do here is we can actually take this right here, this JPEG, click and drag it into GIMP. And it might take a moment because this is actually a large file and it has a different workspace. Just click convert here. It will be completely fine. And here we have the image. And if we actually take a look at the image size here, if we go to scale image, you can see that it's set at this pixel size right here. And then below that, you can see it's set at a 300 PPI or DPI, whatever you want to say. That's a really, really high resolution. And really, that's more for print. We're not going to be printing this. We want this to be set at something lower, which we will do eventually. But we want to keep it as high quality as possible until we scale it down for our final. So let's just hit cancel really quick. And all we really need to do is go up here to filters. And there's some really cool mapping filters here. So this is basically all for 3D. So you can see here there's a bump map, displacement, fractal trace, all sorts of stuff here that you can play around with and take a look at it. But really what we want to do here is just go right here where it says tile seamless. Click that. And you can see that if we click on and off the preview here, you can see that the edges are changing. So the center kind of change, like it stays the same, and there's this sort of faded effect around it. And then the edges, you can see there when I turn it on and off, how it changes like that. So it's basically just duplicating some stuff and making it so where the edges, once it's tiled, it's seamless. So, and you can change with some of these modes here and everything, and you can take the opacity and change this if you'd like. But really, when we are far enough away, this is not going to look like it's a problem. It's actually going to look just fine. So we're going to click OK here, and that's going to set our tiling. And then we're going to go to, actually, let's go ahead and save this. We're going to save this and just keep it as wallpaper. And instead of original, we're going to change this to seamless and keep it as this XCF, which is basically just a GIMP file here. So we can save that. And then we can go to image, and we're going to scale the image, change this to a 96. Click this button right here, which will make it the same. And then here, we're going to change this actually to a 720. Okay, so it'll be 720 by 727 because we will be tiling this. It's going to be in the background. You can make it a higher quality image if you want, but remember, we're going to be rendering this out, and if the higher these image sizes are when we're tiling them, the longer it's going to take, and the more RAM it's going to take, and everything else. So let's just go ahead and scale that, and we can zoom in with the plus button here, and you can see there, looks like that. And we can export this as a, we're going to just save this out as a JPEG. We don't need it to be a PNG. A JPEG is a lossy format. PNGs are less lossy, but because this is going to be in the background and we're not going to do a whole bunch of stuff to it, we're going to keep this just as a JPEG. And we saved the original XCF file here. So if you needed to go back and save a larger file, you can. So let's just save this out here. And keep this as that there and click export, and now we have that image. So when we now change this to the seamless JPEG that we have right here, and you can see when it's this size, there is a pixelation. However, it's going to be something that's tiled much more like this here. And when we zoom out, it's less easy to see those slices and the repeated pattern, and it looks kind of cool. So that's going to be what we use for the wallpaper in the end. So we're just kind of like setting up that image texture for us to use later to create a material from. So let's go ahead and close that out here. And we already saved it, so we can discard this here. Next, we're going to do a quick edit on this 1800s map. And this is sort of optional. What we're going to end up doing, I'm going to show you two ways to do this. Just click that convert there. I'm going to show you two ways that we could do this. We can basically have a flat plane that rests on top of the table and you use an alpha channel. Or what is going to be the better way of doing this to give a little bit of thickness, we're going to be creating a shape that will actually follow the outline of this on the UV and in the actual shaping of the object itself. So when we create this, just keep that in mind. I'm going to be showing you how to do this in both ways, but let's go ahead and do this here. So first, what we need to do to create an alpha channel is we actually have to right click on the layer over here, and we need to add the alpha channel here. Okay. Then what we want to do is we can use the fuzzy select, and we can click on the black here. And in order to grab more of this black, what we actually need to do is take this threshold and increase this. So let's go ahead and try that again. And let's increase the threshold a bit more. And that looks like it's a bit better. And we're just going to right click here and we're going to add a layer mask. And we're going to click where it says invert mask right here and make sure that it says selection right there. And press add. Now what you can see here is that we have an alpha outline, and when we zoom out you can see that there's an alpha channel. It looks like it didn't grab quite a bit, so what you might want to do is go back and try and grab more. So Control Z like this here, and we can actually take the fuzzy select, increase the threshold by a bit more, and you can see that's grabbing more of it, and then redo that really quick here. Add layer mask. Invert mask is selected, click add, and you can see there we have the outline. And from here, what we can do is we can go to image, and then we're going to scale the image, and we're going to change this again to a 96. Click this little button right here that will set it correctly. And we can keep this value right here set like that, and then click scale and file, export as, and we can name, we want this to be a PNG because that will have a alpha channel, so PNG. And we will name this fix or final or whatever you want to call it. Click export, and you want to keep kind of everything as you can see it right here, and then click export. And before we close this down, file, save as, and you want to keep this as an XF file just in case you have to go back in there and change anything. Just like that. And let's go ahead and close that down. Next, let's go ahead and make this flame asset here. Again, this is going to be really large when you bring it in, but we want to keep all the information until we are kind of like finished. So don't scale it down unless you absolutely have to because your computer can't handle it or something like that. And we're going to do our edits on the larger version. What we want to do when we are editing an image a lot, we want to kind of duplicate that layer so that we can go back if we need to, but we can also A/B, like check against what we had originally and what the new one is and see if we can see if there's any errors or any issues or anything like that. So let's go ahead and duplicate the layer, and we're going to hit the plus sign and zoom in a bit. And this next part is actually a lot easier done inside of Photoshop because the way that they have some AI assisted image fixes and clone stamping and stuff like that is a lot better in there. But we can do the exact same thing pretty quickly by using this right here. So you can see if we, yours might look a little bit different, and you can change your settings here by going to Edit Preferences and going to your themes and your icons and changing these around here. But basically, where you see the clone stamp tool, this stamp looking thing, go to the healing brush. And let's just keep it on this candle burning.jpg copy here. And you can see there's a lot of these settings over here on the left, and I'm sorry that it's kind of small. I have large monitors, so I can't scale this up anymore. But we can adjust a lot of this stuff here. And the hardness, you want to keep it kind of a soft brush because you don't want to very clearly see an edge. But basically what we can do here is kind of like the way that a clone stamp tool is done. You can hold control down to select an area, and you can see that selected there. And if we left click and just start brushing here, you can see that we're starting to get rid of this wick that's here. And really what we want is just this candle flame. So if I control left click and I just start dragging around a bit, you can see that I'm starting to adjust these colors to remove that wick from it. And it sort of softens it out to where it's not as visible. And what we really want to do is try to get rid of some of this down here as well. And we can zoom in and grab a different section. And you kind of have to be a little bit careful here. You don't want to go too far too quickly. And we can just start erasing the non-flame looking elements from here. So we can start doing that and make this look a little bit more like a flame here. And as I'm doing this, just keep in mind, we're going to be looking at this from really far away. We don't need to spend a whole lot of time doing this. And you probably could get away without doing a whole lot of what I'm doing here. In fact, I think the example that I showed, I did a lot less work on that one. But I'm just showing you how you can do this in case you are going to have the camera closer or you're going to use this for something else. you can adjust it just like that. And what we can do as well is we can take the blur tool here. You can see that we have a smudge tool, a blur tool, and a dodge. Take the blur and kind of run it around a little bit, and it will sort of mix those colors a little bit better, and you can even smudge some of these areas together so that it doesn't look as sort of painted. So you could do something kind of like that. Just, experiment around a little bit, save every so often to make sure that if you get something you like that you can keep it and you don't get rid of it or anything. But when we zoom out, it looks kind of like that. So you can see that it's a little bit patchy, but if we look at the one before and the one after, you can see that it's pretty well sort of like hidden at this point. And again, we're going to be pretty far away, so you don't need to worry too much about like making it look 100% perfect. If you wanted to, you could try, but that's really not going to be an option, I don't think. And because it's going to be so far away, this is going to work just fine. So the next thing we can do here is grab the fuzzy select tool here, and you can adjust the threshold a little bit, like I'll pull it down. And what's really cool is you can left click and drag a section, and it will just keep adding more and more colors. And if you see, I dragged down and then up, it's selecting more and less color there. So that seems okay. Let's zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to hold shift to add some more color, and we're just going to shift and left click and drag down and do like this here. Maybe get rid of that. So I'm holding control and I'm just, or sorry, yeah, this is control, left click, and I'm moving it up just to get rid of some of these colors like this, because we really don't want that black area there. We're going to add a glow later. So you can spend again, you can spend as much time or as little time doing this as you want to make this perfect, but this is probably going to work just fine. And we can also add another sort of like effect where we can use more black values to create an alpha channel later if we want to. So what we're going to do here is we're going to right click, add a layer mask, deselect the invert mask because we actually have this area selected that we want, and press or select add, and then turn off this background. You can see there we have the flame, and we can go to image. Then right here we can crop to selection just like that, and then we can save this file as candle burning fix or whatever you want to call it. Save, and we can file, export as the fix, and we want this to be a PNG. But before we do that, actually, we want to scale this down. So image, we want to scale the image, and you can see here that it's pretty small as far as the height and width. Actually, 1076 is probably too high. We could probably change this to a 720 like that, and then change this to 96 for the PPI for a screen resolution. Scale that, and then file, export as candle burning fix PNG, export, and then click export. And there we have those 2D assets made. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this tutorial. Hopefully you all learned how to do some really cool stuff in 2D and in 3D as far as the appending assets and everything else. If you liked this tutorial, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to go above and beyond like these fine people here, you could become a patron or a member. And the links are all provided below in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time on DJ Tutorials.